for your midterm project, we're going to explore how to bring meaning into some of our drawings. For this project, you're going to set up a still life and explore how you can imbue meaning into each of your still life selections. And so, to inspire us and get you thinking about some examples of artwork that uses still life as a dual meaning, we are going to look at some examples of paintings from the Vanitas genre. Now, vanitas is a Latin word meaning vanity, and loosely translated, it corresponds to the meaninglessness of earthly life and the transient nature of all earthly good and pursuits. It's pretty dark. Now, I really want to express that you don't have to choose objects that have such dark of a meaning. You can choose objects that have personal meaning to you or express some other kind of story or meaning. This is just a historical example that you can take inspiration from. So like I mentioned, Vanitas is a type of symbolic artwork that's especially associated with still life painting. Most of the work we're looking at comes from the Netherlands in the 16th and 17th centuries. And as I mentioned, vanitas is a Latin word that means vanity. Now, we're looking at our first example here. There's a whole bunch of different objects arranged together. And you can imagine what some of those dual meanings might be. For example, we see the arrangement of a candle. Candles are a common theme within Vanitas still lifes. And thinking about the symbolism, the dual symbolism they might have, it's often used to symbolize the spirit or life. So sometimes you'll see a candle burning bright. Other times you might see a candle snuffed out, sort of symbolizing the ending of life. Other times you'll see the candle so that it's melted all the way down to the point where it's just about to burn out. That can kind of symbolize the passage of time and the short time that people have here on Earth, essentially. Within this piece, there's many other common symbols you'll see within Vanitas artworks. For example, there is the peeled lemon that's often used to symbolize how people can be beautiful on the outside, and then sometimes there's another bitterness that's hidden within it, kind of like a lemon. You can also see there's like the image of that eye meant to represent the all-seeing eye of God. You see the knight's shield and sword meant to symbolize chivalry or valor. And there's actually a biblical verse that's added in here. The Lord is thy shepherd. It actually is sort of symbolizing the passage into the afterlife. So a lot of times, especially this time period in Europe, a lot of them are meant to symbolize other biblical stories. And one last image within this one, the rocks with the slingshot, is also meant to symbolize the David and Goliath story from the Bible. So, as we look through each of one of these pieces, you'll see these are very meant to represent a very specific period in time. As I mentioned, these are all from the Northern European region, 16th, 17th century. So oftentimes they're kind of preoccupied with religious meaning. If you were a viewer looking at this work, it actually had that dual meaning. You were meant to look at it, and it was meant to give you a better understanding of your spirituality. You're meant to think about your time on Earth and how you're spending it, essentially. And one example from within this particular piece, they saw vanity as spending your times in ways that weren't working towards your position in the afterlife. Now, as I'm saying, this is not necessarily these meanings, I wouldn't say, are morals that people hold today. They're very specific to this time period in Europe. For example, you see all the books stacked up and held there. That was meant to symbolize knowledge. Now, you would think, I feel like what's common within our society and culture today is, learning, um, understanding your world more is seen as a virtue, while at this point in history, that was actually seen as frivolous. It was put within this painting in a way to say that all this knowledge and things that you learn won't do you any good in the afterlife. Um, there's some other sort of dual symbolism within this piece too. The bubble, you see the little cherub um, blowing the bubble. Bubbles were a common theme because they're around for a short period of time and then they could pop. Um, the flower down on the bottom, you see it's kind of in dual stages of, full bloom, and then it's starting to degrade. You see money symbolizing vanity, the skull symbolizing death. And then there's a man in the background sort of revealing that painting. It's hard to see, but that is a symbol of Christ on the cross. So also sort of an allusion to what might happen in the afterlife. Other common Vanitas symbols include, as I mentioned before, skulls symbolizing death. Rotten fruit is a common symbol you'll see, sort of symbolizing decay or overabundance. People didn't have time to eat that delicious fruit because they had too much of it. You'll also see things that are meant to symbolize the suddenness of death is smoke or watches. Oftentimes hourglasses are shown to show the passage of time. Fruit, flowers, butterflies are all sort of symbolize the same thing about the brevity of life. Sort of it's a short, beautiful moment in time. Seafood is another common symbol, which actually has kind of a similar meaning to the peeled lemon we talked about before, that it is beautiful to look at but bitter to taste. So you could kind of relate that to how things in life are sometimes. You're meant to take away from this greater moral message. Also, I would point out within this particular piece, oftentimes there were pictures of ancestors or people who've passed away. And I would say within students' work, sometimes that's often something they like to add into the pieces, having an image of something that is personally important to them. Music is another common symbol that you see because music has a finite beginning and a finite end. It's meant to represent sort of your time here on Earth. You'll also see often rotten meat or rotten foods within Vanitas artworks. It's meant to show sort of, overabundance or the opulence of wealth. During this time period, meat was not something you ate all the time, or it was commonly seen as something that the wealthy had kind of an overabundance for. So seeing it rotten, it's meant to be sort of a occasional feast item, sort of shows that overabundance. The other thing I wanted to mention that is important is thinking about your arrangement. You want to use your page with an interesting composition and how you have things organized, whether they're nice and neat or whether they're sort of chaotically arranged, can also add to the meaning of your pieces, sort of the chaos of life, or do you want to show things are neat and orderly? Lighting is another important thing. I want to stress within your pieces, try to have a strong light source. It's going to make your job easier, and it also adds a certain drama to the overall look of your piece. Because you're working on this at home, you could have a variety of angles that you choose to place your pieces within. You could be looking at it up on a ledge. You could be looking down on it. This is something you can explore with your thumbnail sketches too, how much you want to include or how little. You could crop in, or you could show more of the background. It's totally up to you. And When you think about it, the examples that we're showing, a lot of these are historical. The objects within them speak to a particular time period, right? When you're looking at them, uh, they don't look like something that would be made within modern times. And I want you to think about, how you could make this speak to your personal life or the times that we live in. There is one artist in particular. Now, I wouldn't say she is particular contemporary. Her work is from the um, 70s and 80s mostly, and that artist is Audrey Flack. She was interested in using uh, the Vanitas concept and bringing it into modern life, thinking about those same themes and how she could translate them into her everyday life. And you can see she uses a lot of those similar symbols that we talked about, but she has translated them so they're more specific to her. You see the candle that's sort of slowly burning down, showing the passage of time, the hourglass. She has fruit within there, but actually, I'm not sure if you can tell, it's plastic fruit. So kind of showing, it's kind of a play on the abundance of fruit that you see in some of those early Vanitas pieces. But is it really abundance? It's sort of imagined abundance once you put it into plastic form. She also has some other symbols that are outside of that reference spirituality, that are not within the Christian faith like we saw before. She has tarot cards predicting the future. She has a Ouija board in there. So kind of talking about the afterlife and predicting the future. The mirror in particular is of particular importance to her. Because she shows in the one mirror it shows the reflection, in the other one she describes it, you can kind of see it as that rainbow reflection within the mirror. She sort of is trying to document the idea of us connecting with the spiritual world. She also has some things within hers. We'll see a couple more here in a minute of Audrey Flack's. Also translating the idea of vanity to a modern sense, and vanity as it reflects to her as a woman. So you'll see often represented some of those kind of traps of modern vanity, like the lipstick or jewelry, those kinds of things. So within this project, you're required to create a still life symbolizing the Vanitas. Now you can think about, it doesn't necessarily have to be about life and death, but you're trying to think of a message you're trying to explore through the objects that you have chosen. And when you're trying to translate that message, this is kind of another example from Audrey Flack. Thinking about things that are important to you in your life can be a great way of starting. She's an artist. Oftentimes she puts her own paints and paintbrushes in it to kind of express a part of her personal life. Other artists are actually interested in exploring some of those ideas of abundance and how they translate to the modern life. As you can see in this example, this is kind of a modern take on the overabundance you often see displayed in some of those Vanitas pieces that maybe aren't particularly the best for you or your body. It's actually the same idea that was expressed in some of those earlier Vanitas pieces, kind of the overabundance that can be seen as, being unvirtuous. And as I mentioned, Audrey Flack has a lot of great examples of that kind of idea of overabundance and vanity. Here you see again her exploring some of those ideas of vanity in the modern sense, and exploring her idea as a woman and what's kind of expected, things that are expected of you, and the way that you look. So you can see she's got all the makeup put in there, different fruit mirrored objects, kind of implying looking at yourself in the mirror. Other times she explores she uses objects that are more personal to her, like images of family who has passed away, um, personal objects of importance to her, like the necklace. And then other times she explores ideas of chance through like the chess set or the game card. And she has some of those other commonly used Vanitas themes of the fruit and flowers. And she's using kind of a more contemporary lens, cropping in on her still lifes, looking at them from above, filling her compositional space with objects. Those are all things you can think about doing yourself. Now, for this particular assignment today, your goal is to have a minimum of 3 to 5 objects for your still life. For this particular post, you're just going to upload an image of your still life. Now, this is not the image that you're going to draw from. You're just going to show me the still life that you have set up. Remember to pick objects that the meaning is imbued within. So it could either have personal meaning or maybe it's cultural meaning. Maybe you're taking inspiration from some of the Vanitas still lifes that we viewed, or maybe you're trying to make it into something more contemporary. And at the end of this, you're just going to upload that image to this assignment post. If you're unsure and you want to upload more than one, feel free to upload multiple images. Just to show you a couple examples of previous still lifes that students have set up. Some of this obviously has more than the 3 to 5 objects. This student included a lot of objects, some objects that are personal to her, like the mini Eiffel Tower and this particular book that was of importance to her. And, the beautiful lighting that she's put up, it feels almost like a classical Vanitas still life. Just to show you a different example that is also very successful. This is another student who set up a still life, this time with just the 3 objects. But the lighting that this particular artist used and the way she has separated the objects with the cast shadow is really beautifully done. So you can see how you can set your still life up to be suggestible, even with a few objects, by the way that you play with lighting. Then just to show you a third example that's also very different, this particular artist chose to employ some of those cropping techniques that we talked about that Audrey Frack was using earlier. So using that variety of objects and also using some contemporary cropping techniques. All right, I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with for your still lifes. And as I said, in the next modules, you'll see the steps as you work through them.